Today we're interviewing Jellie Duckworth with LivZero. Hi, Jellie.
Hi, Bob.
Tell us a little bit about your background. How did you become interested in the environment and climate issues?
Oh goodness. I didn't really grow up with like a direct relationship with being outside in nature. I mean, I played sports. I think how just being outside was introduced to me. My dad used to travel because he had territories around the country. He was in sales. And we would go on long road trips with him and visit the mountains in Colorado or, in Arizona. And it very much felt like the stereotype that like nature is like out there and like not in our backyards unless you were playing sports, but it wasn't like a direct relationship with it. So it really wasn't until I grew up and like developed my own spirituality, and really realized like how safe like being outside felt for me. And I just started really doing my own hiking and doing my own riding my bike outside and realize that like this is just where I feel the most myself. But I didn't really have anybody to share that with until I got a lot older in my life. And when I went to college, I studied sociology, and that was the first time I was introduced to indigenous culture and linguistics and how deeply related they are to their appreciation and gratitude for nature. And I found that to be extremely beautiful and admirable. And so I continued to do my research in that, and I started to incorporate a lot of those same values. And I decided that this is a path I want to go on. I want to understand the depth of relationship to our environments, not just in this big, broad nature is out there, but very much in our backyards and in our urban spaces. And so um, that's how I got into this work thus far. Yeah.
When did you first become aware of the climate issues as a crisis, specifically the climate crisis? What made you aware of that?
Hmm. That's a good question. I think it became really tangible for me, and again on like a very spiritual level, when I was learning about indigenous culture, and the horrible land practices that were enacted that stripped away a lot of not only their land but their culture and their people as we know. And so really understanding my history was the first time I realized that we were not only taking away beautiful spaces, but we were taking away culture. So they go hand in hand. And then growing up in the city, you start to realize that, because I grew up in a space on just west of Truce, right on Kansas City's dividing line, and really understanding the redlining that was happening. These are a lot of things that we learn in sociology. So having that kind of geographical and cultural understanding of how things became the way they are, I really started to understand how it relates to my surroundings, like in current day. And so it was really around like unjust land practices that really made me aware that that's the reason why I'm also seeing all this abandoned spaces around me in the city and nothing's being done. And so that made sense for why there was illegal dumping, right across the street. And it made sense for why there was abandoned homes. So that was like the real tangible way of seeing it, just kind of putting the pieces together from history to present day, and realizing that I was just surrounded by a lot of blight. And this is very much related to a lot of these very unjust land practices from a long time ago. So,
You've been introduced to me as a climate justice worker. Can you tell me what that title means to you?
mm. Climate justice is a social justice. They're the same thing for me, but I think another way that I see like my role as a climate justice worker or an advocate is really understanding the healing that is involved in the process of finding climate solutions and building resilient cities that understand the racial structures. And we can, yes, redo them and build new policy to help make a more sustainable and just environments, but we really also need to understand the deep rooted psychological causes of these structures and what they perpetuated in historically marginalized communities. So it is social justice, it is climate justice, and a lot of the intersection of that for me is healing community, listening, and making sure that we have a platform to tell our stories, because that is really important when we're trying to relieve really all of these structural pressures that have been on us over time, and the weight that's been like on our minds. So it is both internal and external for me.
So let's talk a bit about your organization, LivZero. You're the founder of that. So tell us a little bit about what led you to starting this group and what your group does.
Yeah, thank you. So LivZero is a community planning firm, and we partner with environmental nonprofits, institutions, and municipalities to design and strategize upstream climate solutions for historically marginalized communities and frontline communities. Um, and I decided to kind of branch off from my work in the nonprofit industry because I realized that there was a focus that was needed in our work, but capacity was so limited when we're a nonprofit. And so we get into this perpetual state of, okay, we got to fundraise, but we only have a small amount of time to actually do the work. And then we're working with teams of like 4 people, but we're trying to serve mass, communities. And so I realized that the best route for me was to be able to come in as a third party and really guide and support nonprofits that I had worked with in a way where they wouldn't have to be stretched thin anymore, and that we could really get at the root cause of the climate, health, and equity issues that we were trying to solve. So LivZero is really about the sweet spot of like what, not only understanding like who and what we're, who we're targeting and what we're doing, but really answering why and how, and contextualizing that information. So we use everything from research to creative storytelling, and then we make that into very much implementable solutions around climate equity and climate justice. So yeah.
So LivZero, what does that name mean? Living with zero what?
LivZero. LivZero means zero pollution, zero injustice. We want to live in communities where we can build health, wealth, and well-being. That is what that means.
And that's really great. Obviously, you have a website. What's your website?
Yeah, you can go to www.livzero.com. Mm-hmm.
So what brought you to the Climate Council?
Well, I met you, Bob. Yeah, and some other work that I was doing for the city of Kansas City under a consultant group called Brindle Group, working on Kansas City's climate protection and resiliency plan. We were reaching out to people who have been at the forefront of this fight, and you being one of them, the Climate Council being this very rich space for people who really want to see the needle moved, to come together and to use a platform to amplify each other's voices and actions and work. And so from a LivZero perspective, I wanted to be part of that community because I also have stories to share, and I want to share other people's stories. And I think the Climate Council is a great space to continue to build on this collective action that we really don't see day to day in our work. It sometimes feels like silos, but then you have a space like Climate Council where it's just like, remember, we all have the same goals here, right? And so that's really what draws me, the aspect of community that has similar interests and similar principles and goals, and we're working in different sectors of it, but we get to learn from each other and how to put those pieces together.
Where do you plan to go from here? I mean, what's the future of climate in your mind, and your future? Where do you see yourself a few years from now? And LivZero, where do you see that being a few years from now?
I wish I had a defined answer for you with that, but my big kind of grandiose vision is to help support and build platforms for more um, women, particularly more women who have been historically marginalized, women of color, to be in leadership positions around climate equity and climate justice. So having LivZero be a space where, one, we can come together and learn from each other, but also to share our work and to share our framework so that we are supporting each other in this process. I do want to see more leadership in the climate space because it is still run by predominantly aging white men. No offense, Bob. And as a young, Mexican American woman, I want to see more of us be these leading with small businesses and large businesses. And so, if anything, I would like to be a space. I would like to be a mentor for young, youth to come into the entrepreneurship space, social entrepreneurship and climate space, so that they can see that there is a direct pathway to leadership. And so yeah, there's a lot of things I think that's incorporated in that, as my time as a longtime organizer. And I really have those organizing principles in me, and advocacy, essentially taking our work and developing true policy is the ultimate goal, and teaching other people how to do that so we continue this process even when I'm no longer here. So I don't know if LivZero will be the entity of all of that, but it's definitely a starting point, like a launch pad for myself and other young females who want to be at the forefront of the decision-making process. So
Thank you, Jellie. It's been a pleasure talking to you today.
thanks, Bob.